Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and it's a time of rapid strategic change. Let me suggest, first of all, that if you haven't already done it, send a Twitter to Save Our Guys, right? The hashtag or, sharp sign, Save Our Guys. And that's Oleg and Marat of Life TV, who are being held by the Kiev fascist clique. So we now have a weekend of big elections. We have the entire European Union in the European Parliament elections. This will be an important indication, barometer of which way the European and to some extent developed countries are going. And then we've got this Ukrainian election, such as it is. Now, the level of violence in Ukraine remains quite high, and we've had a number of incidents in which the Ukrainian armed forces have been taking it on the chin. On Thursday, in an incident which attracted some attention, about a dozen Ukrainian military people were killed in those eastern provinces that are interested in greater autonomy or independence. And today, we have a reported friendly fire incident, if that's what it is, where Ukrainian army helicopters attacked their own ground positions. Many explanations. Were these Ukrainian conscripts who refused to kill protesters, and were they being punished? Was it simply a staged incident that the Ukrainian army wanted to blame on the separatists, as they call them? So we don't know that, but level of violence continues high. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has demanded to know the truth. Is it the case that a right sector, Pravi sector, fascist delegation came here to Washington, D.C., and did they meet secretly with the U.S. Assistant Secretary for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland, the foul-mouthed Victoria Nuland, wife of the neocon Kagan and a key part of the neocon machine there in the State Department? That's an interesting question. People should raise that at the State Department briefing. The NATO command says that there are some indications that the Russian military forces drawn up at the border with Ukraine have been receding somewhat. So I suppose in the middle of this we ought to put that Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, speaking today at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, indicated that he would accept the results of this election. An election is always okay. He doesn't like what else is going on. He says that Russian journalists, as we've just mentioned, are being held in Gestapo prisons by the Kiev fascists. And he also warned once again that sanctions boomerang. Now, to some, this would indicate a possible deal, a sub-rosa understanding between Putin and Poroshenko, the Poroshenko, the chocolate king, the member of the British-centered cocoa cartel, chocolate cartel, but has he been pulled away? This is the so-called Willy Wonka of Ukraine with the chocolate factory. He's had some clashes lately with Russia. One of his factories was I believe, confiscated. And I think he lost some property there when Crimea was repatriated. But you get the idea. Poroshenko, perhaps an opportunist, perhaps bribed, perhaps some combination of carrot and stick. So is Putin willing to try to get along for a time with Poroshenko? Remember, in this whole question, you've got to take the long view, because Putin is certainly taking the long view. This is always one of the strengths of Russian diplomacy and strategy, is that it's not oriented towards immediate results, that it has an idea of the long view, and it's willing to exercise patience. And again, the trump card really for Russia is that when those genocidal economic sanctions of the International Monetary Fund begin to bite with all their full fury, and notice, those sanctions, the austerity conditionalities dictated by the IMF, right, the neoliberal shock therapy and rape of Ukraine, those have been delayed until after this vote, with the idea that it would be better for those running for office if they didn't have to explain and support the IMF sanctions. But when those sanctions begin to bite after the elections, whoever is in power is going to be chewed up pretty fast. So it's Poroshenko leading in the polls, and of course the other challenger, Tymoshenko, the kleptocratic gas princess and NATO agent. Now, the other thing that Putin seems to be figuring is that Ukraine voters will not come out for Svoboda. They will not come out for right sector. They will not come out for Yarosh or Parubi or others. So the future for Ukraine looks grim in that sense. Right? The Kiev fascist clique will soon be at least diluted to some extent. However, we should also remember these are not free elections. Just last week, we had the fascist thug President Turchinov in his capacity. He's the president, I guess, but he's president by virtue of being the president of this infamous Rada in Kiev. The Communist Party leader was giving a speech about how a Nazi regime had taken hold in Kiev, and Turchinov simply said, "You shut up, you sit down, and by the way, we're going to now outlaw the Communist Party." That's the level in Kiev. And of course, behind Turchinov, happy to play along with him on this, are these Nazi stormtrooper, brown shirt, Sturmabteilung types, the relics of the late Muzichka, in other words, the right sector. So remember that members of the Rada have been beaten up. They have been forced to flee, or sometimes they've been stopped from fleeing, so they could be beaten up some more. There are several hundred members of the Kiev Rada who disappeared from Kiev. They left Kiev at the time of the coup, and they haven't shown up since. In other words, you're dealing with a rump Rada. You've got a rump Ukraine, and fittingly enough, you've got a rump Rada. Presidential candidates have also been beaten up, not just members of the Rada, but presidential candidates beaten up and forced to withdraw from contention. So with that kind of reign of terror, the mob rule, the reign of the thug and the hooligan and the tough, this is what we have going in Ukraine at this point. So Putin says he's going to hold his nose and see what happens. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. We're going to be at Left Forum in New York City this coming Saturday, the 31st of May, Saturday afternoon. I'll give you the exact coordinates a little bit later, but you can find it on the Left Forum website. So Left Forum at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. I'll be there on Saturday with an interesting program also of some other speakers. You can find all the details on the Left Forum website. All right, so the Ukrainian election coming up. Now, it's a couple of interesting revelations here concerning Femen, right? We have NATO's killer skanks, Femen. And remember, this is a division of labor, right? You can see this comes from the same sort of Tavistokian laboratory of psychosexual provocation, right? This is going on a lot in various ways. Femen are specialized in Ukraine primarily, but also in Belarus, and they actually started to some degree in Belarus. And we have on the various sources here, and you can see this also with you can look at it on my my Twitter feed. We have the names of the controllers, right? That the Femen is the creation of this misogynist scoundrel who talks about them as being weaklings and they're incapable of making strategy and so forth. He denigrates them in the extreme, and this is supposed to be a feminist group. Victor Sviatski, Svyatski, that's the honcho. So Femen, created in Belarus and Ukraine by this Victor Sviatski. Look at it. You can find the exact spelling there on my Twitter, Webster G. Tarpley. But these Femen, at least one of them, was a participant in the Odessa massacre of May 2nd, in which, according to some accounts, more than 100 people perished, and they were not simply burned. That was not the main thing, but that there were death squads that went through the halls. The right sector sent in death squads and killed a lot of people in the halls of the trade union building and also on the sidewalks around it. And the Femen were there, approving, taking part, gesticulating, fist saluting, as they like to do. So this, you're getting into this fascist area where you have a fundamental reactionary group, but they're cultivating left cover. Now, that's one aspect of that Odessa massacre of May 2nd. The other one is various sources, I'm sure the Russian intelligence services have come up with a conversation of some Ukrainian oligarchical pro-NATO honchos who say that Kolomoisky, the oligarch Kolomoisky, Kolomoiski, this is another one of the Ukrainian oligarchs, but Kolomoisky created the conditions in which this massacre took place, in the sense that he hired the thugs and sent them in. And then apparently, according to this phone call, the thugs somewhat overdid it, right? They went beyond the original mandate from Kolomoisky, but that's, of course, to be expected. So that's no excuse of any kind. So we're beginning to see this infrastructure of death, fascism inside Ukraine. Now, the interesting sign here on the U.S. view of these matters, we have David Ignatius, the well-connected speaking tube of the State Department and the CIA, well-introduced on National Public Radio, was on there this morning. Washington Post, Wednesday, May 21st, the Finland model. Now, this is interesting. Essentially, what he's arguing for is Finlandization. Once again, Finlandization. The Russian leader Putin may be ready to accept a neutral country between East and West, where Russia's historical interests are recognized. During the Cold War, such an outcome was known as Finlandization. And you remember I wrote this about 6-7 weeks ago. The very day after my article appeared, Henry Kissinger embraced Finlandization, and now Ignatius. But now when Ignatius says it, I think it shows that there is a more reasonable faction in the U.S. State Department that is somehow telling him these things. And of course, this is the way out, right? If you want to avoid some kind of all-out civil war and or military clash, cool it off for a while. And again, from the Putin point of view, I think it's essentially acceptable in the sense that the International Monetary Fund will do the job of turning the Ukrainian people against the West, against the European Union, because the IMF simply fulfills any dire prediction that pro-Russian propaganda could make about the colonial or neo-colonial status of Ukraine as a plantation of the European Union. That's going to come true under the brutal, genocidal austerity dictatorship. It's also the case. Had an interesting debate on France 24 yesterday. They did their afternoon debate in Moscow, and we had Kasyanov, right, neoliberal prime minister, Putin's first prime minister, Kasyanov, neoliberal. That was from 2000 to 2004 or thereabouts. And they also had our friend Markov from the Institute for Political Studies. But the question here was, who in the Ukraine junta is fascist? Well, Svoboda is fascist and right sector is fascist. But then you've got to think about what fascism means today. And if you're a neoliberal technocrat like Yatsenyuk, you're a fascist also. Because if you're proposing to double the price of gas, to destroy the social safety net, to destroy social subsidies and all the rest, according to the IMF shock therapy, and to sell off the black earth, and to give away the gas distribution network, and to give away the coal and steel from Krivoy Rog to Donetsk, Donbass, then that's fascism also. That's a more modern IMF fascism. And is it genocide? Is the attack in Odessa genocidal? Well, you can argue that. But that IMF austerity program is genocidal for sure. For sure. Hundreds of thousands to millions of deaths. Guaranteed. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, of course, the big event of the week is Putin in China. It has been compared to Nixon's trip to China in 1972, but of course it's turning the tables because this time it's not the U.S. sealing some kind of informal alliance with China against the Soviets. It's Russia is reasserting its close relation with China. And of course, what the other thing we're getting out of this is the rollback of the Sino-Soviet split. Sino-Soviet split was already evident in the late 1950s. It's more than half a century ago. It's 55 plus years with this the kinds of ideological conflicts that Mao in particular unleashed, right? Mao showing what a tremendous asset for imperialism Comrade Mao was, right, with his various wrecking and splitting activities. So what do we have? A deal by which Russia will deliver $400 billion worth of natural gas over 30 years. Now, let me stress, this is not the only thing. There is already oil flowing through pipelines from Siberia to China, and the original estimate was that there were about 50 separate economic accords, arrangements, business partnerships, deals, whatever you want to call it. All of that was on the agenda of Putin's visit to Beijing. But this is the direction of human progress. It cannot be stressed enough. The creation of modern infrastructure, and in particular the creation of modern energy infrastructure, is the royal road of human progress in our time. And it means at the same time that if you're with Grillo, right, if you're saying no to great projects of any kind, or if your main issue in life is to block the Keystone Pipeline, you are headed for the dustbin of history. And I'm sorry, but the main problem of the world is that the infrastructure of the planet has been sorely neglected, especially because of the distortions of World War II and the Cold War. There's a huge infrastructure deficit worldwide, and here is an example of how to get rid of it. The estimates on the infrastructure alone, not the value of the gas now, but the value of the pipelines and other facilities, range from $55 billion to $70 billion. And this refers to pipeline facilities on the Russian side of the border, which will be built by Russia, and on the Chinese side of the border, which will be built by China. And some of it involves the liquefaction of natural gas at the Russian port, Vladivostok, in the Far East. So look at the U.S. Look at the contemptible impotence of the United States, unable to build even this little Keystone Pipeline, which is a tiny little thing by comparison to this. What it shows is that if you're a radical environmentalist, if you believe that economic development has to stop, if your notion of the future is a return to hunting and gathering society or autogestion, right? If you want to go the Richard Wolff route, right? That the answer is that there should be tiny, self-governing, impotent, squabbling little entities trying to cultivate their own particularism. You are headed towards the dustbin of history. You're going to be ethnographic material. And this is, I think, an interesting aspect to this entire thing. What does humanity want and need? Well, it looks like Russia and China think that it means that humanity needs modern energy infrastructure. And of course, if you're green, suppose you're green, right? $70 billion of pipeline. Oh, that's terrible, would the green fanatic would say. The grillino or the anti-Keystone Pipeline or whatever it is. But at the same time, you look at those Chinese cities. China made a decision back in the 1980s. I think it was called the Quadruple Plan at the time. The Quadruple Plan was go with coal. And one of the problems that meant was that the Chinese railroad system already in the 1980s was being severely taxed by the need to move all that coal. So if you're providing natural gas, that's obviously much better from the CO2 point of view. And it certainly is the case that the pollution in the Chinese cities has gone too far, right? This is excessive, right? There's no need for this. And therefore, here's the remedy. The remedy is not to shut things down, let people starve, and go back to hunting and gathering. That would not be feasible in China or anywhere else. And then I just have to insert here this question of Modi. People are writing me saying, what do I think of Modi? I don't know. You tell me about Modi. All I can tell you, as I said last week, is people who voted for Modi were expressing their desires, and these we can see, right? Development, infrastructure, modern energy, roads, railroads, the entire program of rational science and technology in the form of modernization. So that's we'll have to see what Modi does, right? Of course, Modi brings it in a kind of a right-wing, pro-business BJP package with this unfortunate anti-Muslim edge, right? The fact that Modi doesn't seem to have a single Muslim elected anywhere in his party, not even a token, that's a very bad sign in a country with a huge Muslim minority like India. But again, I can't read Modi's mind. Maybe people who know more can tell me. But what we can say is the Indian voter is telling us what they want, right? Infrastructure, modern production, modern energy, modern transportation, and deal with the environment in that context. In other words, what we're seeing with this China and Russia deal, that's what human progress will look like. It'll be big. It will be high tech. It will be modern. It will not be small communities of local basket weavers with their hunting and gathering focus. Now, the U.S., the Anglo-Americans, right? The geopolitical response. There's a broad range of responses. There was also this week the international conference in Beijing on security matters, right? So this also shows us where they're going, right? That this is a certain amount of coordination. So what's the U.S. response? Well, it's interesting to note that according to some reports, there had been some very cordial talks about 10 days earlier between General Dempsey, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here in the Pentagon. General Dempsey and other Pentagon people had just gotten finished hosting a top general from the People's Liberation Army, and this was sort of suggesting that it might be possible to at least get some relaxation of tensions in the Far East. But very soon after that, we've now got the indictment of these four or five Chinese hackers. All right, so look, on the Chinese hackers, we know that the Chinese do the hacking, no doubt. We know that everybody does the hacking, don't we? We know the NSA does it. We know the Chinese do it. The fact that somebody decided to pull this out right now is obviously a desire to torpedo whatever progress Dempsey had made with these Chinese generals at the Pentagon a week or two before. So we'll have more in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. The general idea of Putin and China. Look at the way in which economic cooperation and progress is envisioned. In the West, it's free trade, free trade, free trade, right? Trans-Pacific Partnership, U.S., European Union, free trade sellout, and all this stuff. When you're serious about development, it looks like Putin and Xi. It looks like the $400 billion over 30 years, right? $13 billion a year of gas, but up front, $55 billion to $70 billion in pipelines and other infrastructure. So what you need is infrastructure and trade deals done government to government, not free trade where the corporations dictate to the government and crush labor and indeed environmental concerns, which are real enough, provided they're properly understood. So, not free trade, but infrastructure. That's what this is showing us. This is where you get somewhere, right? And this, of course, means a tremendous increase in the power of Russia and China and the attractiveness of this model to many countries, to Iran, to Turkey, to all sorts of places, right? The neoliberal model is breaking up. So we're getting the breakup of unipolar NATO world domination, and at the same time, we're getting the breakup of the neoliberal free trade consensus, because these are government-sponsored deals, right? These involve companies, but they're virtually state companies, I think, on both sides. And the other aspect is the financing, right? Where the financing, we're not told very much about it. We're not told what the price is. The speculation was, Russia sells natural gas to Europe for $380 per unit. And are they only getting $350 per unit from the Chinese? Well, of course, there's always the principle of quantity buying. And if you're committing yourself to 13 or $14 billion a year over 30 years, then you're going to get significant discounts. So what it does, it introduces a level of long-term stability, predictability, and that has cash value. So there we go with that. So immediately, same week, indictments for, again, the indictments I would suspect are well justified. But of course, once you get into this, you realize everybody does it. And the question becomes, why now? Remember when we had Medvedev here for the Hamburger Summit, right? Whatever Medvedev was, that was one of the most normal U.S.-Russian summits in many years, right? Back when was that? 2010, 2011. And immediately after that, we had Anna Chapman, the Russian Mata Hari, exposed. So you get the idea, right? That this was them, right? The neocons. What do you want to call it? The warmongers, the war party, perhaps, if you want. So the war party, the warmongers, have decided to lash out with these Chinese hacker indictments. And second point, the explosion in Urumqi, China, right? Xinjiang province, Chinese, Turkestan, northwest China, killing 40 or 50 people. Now, who could do that? Well, I don't know, but I know who I would ask. I would ask Rabia Kadir of the World Uyghur Conference. I would ask what she knows about that. That's where I would start. You've also had riots in Vietnam because the Chinese have plots an oil rig in some areas that Vietnam claimed. And you've also got what's going on in Thailand. And I would see Thailand as part of the string of pearls. In other words, China wants very much to have pro-Chinese governments on that critical route across the Indian Ocean. So this applies to Thailand, it applies to Sri Lanka, to India, to essentially all the coasts of the Indian Ocean, because this is another lifeline. Naturally, the effect of the Russian-Chinese natural gas deal is to give China and indeed Russia a guaranteed avenue of peaceful commerce, which is not subject to the influence of the Anglo-American Dutch naval supremacy, right? It's not going to be possible to impose, pirate zones or anything like that on this. It's going to go. So the Sino-Soviet split is over, and Nixon is rolled back. Now, some of this language comes from the op-ed of today. Charles Krauthammer, unreconstructed neocon warmonger. And what does he have to say, right? He's playing the card of, the world thinks Obama's weak. Well, the London Economist wants to know, what will those Americans fight for? Well, we're not going to fight for the geopolitics of the British Empire or the city of London. That not. Self-defense is a good thing to bear in mind, but self-defense does not begin on the other side of the world, right? It doesn't begin in Afghanistan or someplace like this. So you can say the world complained, justifiably, they complained bitterly about Mad Dog Bush and his universal bullying and universal gendarmerie. But now what you're getting is simply the flip side of that, right? Continuing to complain, right? The anti-Americanism, once instituted under Bush, goes on. And once it's instituted, now it takes the form of, you're not intervening enough. Well, there are some people around the world who would complain if the sun came up, wouldn't they? This is especially the case of the British elite, who always loom large in these choruses. But let's look at Charles Krauthammer. What he wants to say is that Obama blabbed about a pivot to Asia, but Putin made a pivot to Asia. Well, I mean, Putin is 3/4 of Putin is in Asia, right? His center of gravity is just as much Asiatic as anything else. But here's the idea. Krauthammer says the U.S. is in decline. You can argue this case. Decline is not a condition. Decline is a choice. In this case, Obama's choice. And it's the one area where he can be said to be succeeding splendidly. Yeah, good rhetoric there, Charles. But here's what I would say to that. It is a choice to decline. When you choose to build the entire financial policy around maintaining the zombie banks and propping up $2 quadrillion of rotten, bankrupt, kited derivatives, toxic derivatives, then you're choosing decline. Yes, indeed. If you let Wall Street dominate your internal politics, if you let the Koch brothers and Soros buy and sell candidates and dominate the Congress, you are choosing decline. But decline is not simply be a warmonger and then you're not in decline, right? As long as you're letting Wall Street determine your entire economic picture, whether you decide to be an appeaser or a warmonger will make very little difference in the long run. And what you're mainly seeing with these deals, right, with Putin in China, is that the U.S. has deliberately classed itself out of these fields. The days when the U.S., 100 years ago, the U.S. built the Panama Canal. I don't know if this could still be done, right? The U.S. Has allowed the atrophy and the disappearance of so many branches of industry. Ultimately, the decision for decline is the decision to deindustrialize and to go for a low-wage economy. And I haven't heard the Krauthammers and the neocons protesting against that too much. And that, of course, is the main question. This is where the Tax Wall Street Party will be engaged in this political scene, right? You want to have a future, you better reindustrialize, and you better break the power of the finance oligarchs and zombie bankers, wipe out a large part of their derivatives on the way. Tsipras seems to be the one suggesting this on the European front. So we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., reminding you that on the 31st, that is this coming Saturday, the last Saturday of May, I'll be at the Left Forum in New York City on the Saturday afternoon. Look up the room and everything on the Left Forum website. But now, in terms of the internal fascistization of the United States, we have these two cases that have arisen in Michigan. The first is an attempt to throw Congressman Conyers off the ballot based on technicalities of petition gathering, and were his petition gatherers and witnesses, were they registered voters in Michigan, and is such a requirement necessary? Now, we're told, first of all, that the American Civil Liberties Union is bringing a case, and I was in contact with Congressman Conyers' office this week, and they say they're going to do a write-in. In other words, they are ready and willing and able to get a write-in to win the election in November, quite apart from whatever happens with the ballot status. So Conyers will not be sent home. And remember, he's got the greatest seniority of any member of the Black Caucus, and I think if he gets reelected this time, which I sincerely hope he will, he'll have more seniority than anybody in the House of Representatives. Coming from 1965, Dingell was the last competition on that, and I think he's retiring this year. But the case that prepared the way for Conyers was, of course, our friend Reverend Pinckney out in Benton Harbor, Michigan, who was, with a Gestapo tactics, was arrested based on the petitions that he was circulating for the recall of Mayor Hightower, the Wall Street mayor of Benton Harbor, installed by Whirlpool Corporation. So let's go to Benton Harbor right now and get an update from Reverend Pinckney. Reverend, are you there?
Yes, I am, Webster. Hey, I'm telling you this. We are fighting down here for our lives down here. You would not believe what happened just recently. We have filed some more evidence against this corrupt mayor that we have. and we're expecting this prosecutor to arrest the mayor any day now. He won't arrest him during the PGA. That he won't do. I know that for a fact. But I believe after the PGA, he's going to have to arrest this mayor. And I tell you, this thing is getting heated up. Just recently, the county clerk went to a commission meeting, and she told the commissioners that she had personally set aside the election for May 6th, the recall election. And they gave her a standing ovation. Then she said that we're going to send Reverend Pinckney to prison, and they gave her another standing ovation. Ooh. She was way out of line. She was out of line. Believe me, she's supposed to be neutral. She doesn't support one or the other, but it appears to me that she supports the setting aside the election. Actually, she filed the lawsuit to set it aside. Wow. Well,
and again, the person doing this, what is their exact position and title once again?
She's the county clerk. The county clerk.
And what's her name?
Her name is Sharon Tyler. Sharon Tyler.
Tyler. So Sharon Tyler, the county clerk of Benton Harbor, of the county around Benton Harbor, Michigan, goes public with a political speech saying we want to call off the election and we want to send Reverend Pinckney to jail.
Absolutely. Wow. Those are her exact words.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to pull it up off the internet, the Barron County Commission meeting, and because I want the exact wording, so when I quote it in court, I know what I'm saying.
Yes. That's outrageous.
Well, who would believe something like that would happen?
But now, the prosecutor is a separate person. Tell us how this is all working.
Well, he's a separate person, but he's also working with Sharon Tyler and the mayor to send me to jail. They're all working together, even though we have the evidence to prove that this mayor went out and manufactured the evidence to stop the election May 6th, and then have me arrested. You know, they came out and surrounded my house. The SWAT team came to my home over a recall petition. Nobody would believe something like that, Webster. They came to my home with a SWAT team to arrest me for a recall petition, which they could have called me on the phone and told me that there was a warrant out for my arrest, and I would have turned myself in immediately.
Now, again, let's tell us the name of the prosecutor and who sent him in.
His name is Michael Sepik, and the sheriff's name is Paul Bailey, and the mayor name is James Hightower.
Oh, man.
So we got it all right, Reverend, and the county clerk is Sharon Tyler.
You are being held under house arrest. How many days of house arrest so far?
36 days.
36 days.
36 days.
And you're still forbidden. You can't use your computer, all that stuff?
Still cannot use my computer.
Well, thank God for the telephone.
Absolutely. Thank God.
Reverend, your legal expenses.
For the radio show.
Tell us now. Tell people how they can contribute to your legal fund and otherwise express support directly to you.
Absolutely. You can send a check to Banco, BANCO, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. That's Banco, BANCO, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. Or you can go to my website, bhbanco.org, and you can donate from there, bhbanco.org, or you can call me at 269-925-0001. And also tomorrow we have a mass demonstration here in Benton Harbor. I won't be there, but Banco will be there.
So you can't go because you're under house arrest.
That's correct. I'm under house arrest. It will be the 37th day tomorrow. I'm under house arrest, but yet still it goes on, and that's what they don't like.
Reverend, where is that demonstration for people who are within striking distance to come to it?
It's going to be at Benton Harbor, Michigan City Hall, 200 Wall Street. You can map quest it, 200 Wall Street, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. It starts at 10:30 in the morning. Be there. We need your support.
Okay, and that's on Saturday, the 24th of May.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, and then what? What else is happening?
Friday, I go to court for the preliminary examination. That's when they're going to present their evidence.
Okay, so that's like a pretrial hearing.
That is what you call a pre-trial hearing. And we better be ready for them because they done pulled every trick in the book.
I should say. Well,
absolutely,
then.
Absolutely. But we still fighting. We haven't given up, and we won't give up.
Of course not. Now, so this is what it looks like in Governor Snyder's Michigan today.
Absolutely. You know, you got Conyers. Conyers had office called me and wanted me to support them, and I told them I would. And I told them whatever I can do, I can rally the people down there in Detroit to give him more support. And I told him that my door is open for him, and whatever he needs, he got me.
It would be nice if he came to visit you.
Oh, absolutely, but I don't think that would happen. He just want my support. He don't want to give his support.
Well, maybe he'll see the light.
It don't work like that. When you're elected official, you want other people's support. You're not going to give them your support.
All right, Reverend, more power to you. Keep fighting. Keep telling us what's new. We'll be back next week for another update, and good luck with that demonstration, and good luck in court next Friday. We'll have to see when we get you on. Is that in the afternoon on Friday?
About time at 1:30, probably be over with.
Okay, give us a number where we can call you.
All
right. We'll see you soon.
All right.
We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, in the midst of this active political season of primary elections, and with everybody looking forward to the congressional vote in November, we want to go to Nebraska. And, of course, everybody who's been watching these primaries, especially on the Republican side, is aware of a new Republican golden boy, Ben Sass. He's actually a liberal Republican. You can see it from his resume, but as a demagogue, he's decided to disguise himself as a member of the Tea Party. So he's spouting the usual reactionary stuff, even though he's really a big government internationalist, I'm sure, in his own way. But the news is not Sass. The news is that even though the Democratic Party has apparently decided not to commit much in the way of resources to stopping Sass, that would be the Democratic candidate Domina, there is a third choice, and that's the one we're interested in. It's the Tax Wall Street Party, and it's Dan Burdorf, very fine candidate, lifelong Nebraskan as far as I know, operating out of Lincoln, and Dan is with us today. So we want you to get to know him because he's going to be one of the important wild cards here in the November election. Dan, welcome.
Thanks very much, Webster. Thank you very much.
We're delighted to have you. Now, why don't you start? You want to start with telling us the situation there in terms of Sass and Domina and what you plan to do, and then we want to hear something about you.
Well, sure. I want to talk about my platform, and but the basic background is that we have a Wall Street candidate named Sass, and we've got two parties in Nebraska. We have the Conservative Party and the Reactionary Party. That's the Democrats and the Republicans. And and the Democrats in Nebraska are notoriously weak. I think that's fair to say. And they're running kind of like a third party. And that's what we're looking at. We've got big pockets for both parties. I mean, maybe Sass might have, at this point, maybe 5 times, 10 times as much money as a Democrat, but we're talking like a lot of money for both. And the Democratic candidate is a lawyer, and he's got a lot of lawyer friends in Omaha. And of course, Sass is backed by, Koch money, by all kinds of conservative groups. You can go to the FEC and look at that yourselves. I'd encourage you to do that. And
I think it's Americans for Prosperity, Tea Party Patriots. So
the list goes on and
Koch
on.
groups.
You bet. You bet.
And some others.
And I'm a fifth-generation Nebraskan, and I was born and raised in Lincoln, and I graduated from the University of Nebraska, and I'm running for U.S. Senate in Nebraska as the Tax Wall Street Party candidate for senator. And I'm proud to bring a platform of economic development back to my home state and to the people of Nebraska. And I'd really encourage people, please check out my platform at danfornebraska.com. This is a winning program, a winning platform, and I'm asking the good people listening to fight with me. Webster, I got to tell you something. 1 out of every 5 hamburgers is grown in the state of Nebraska. 1 out of every 5 packages of beef you buy at the store comes from a Nebraska ranch. And it's my job to protect our farmers and ranchers from Wall Street cartels and Wall Street predators. They've got these ranchers and farmers growing food at less than it costs to produce the food, and that just can't continue. They have to be paid at least the cost of growing the food, and that's what I'm shooting for, and that's what groups like the Nebraska Farmers Union here support. And I've got to get this message out to them and to Nebraska. So come join this fight with me by first visiting my website at danfornebraska.com and go to Dan for Nebraska on Facebook and like my page there, and follow me at Dan for Nebraska on Twitter. Your listeners, I know, are familiar with the American Society of Civil Engineers estimate that we need to invest about $4 trillion into infrastructure over the next 10 years and get our roads and bridges and trains up to standard. I think we need to do more than that to get to the 21st century infrastructure in America. I want to see high-speed rail from New York to Los Angeles going right through Lincoln and Omaha. So imagine these families separated from their kids on the coast and being able to see them in just a few hours. Imagine someone being able to go to a cultural event in Chicago or Denver in less time than it takes now, or a business meeting in Kansas City. I think we can have world-class infrastructure if we make the Fed stop bailing out banks and start bailing out America. And we can pay for it with the Fed using long-term interest-free credit. And I love the idea of this peace race. That's one of my platforms on danfornebraska.com. I love the idea of outproducing China in high-tech energy, or high-tech transportation. So we need a modern 21st century transportation system and a modern 21st century infrastructure. So let's take the Federal Reserve under the control of Congress, make the Federal Reserve act like a national bank, and start repairs and major new projects coast to coast to bring high-paying, high-value jobs to American workers and companies. And again, you can see all of this at danfornebraska.com. And if your listeners would check, thank you very much. If your listeners would check that out, please. I have a short piece on my website. It's called the U.S. Postal Service. It's about the U.S. Postal Service. It's in the news section. It's called Going Down the Line, and where I talk about the need to save the post office from the poison pill Denny Hastert stuck in it before he left office. This is in the news section on my webpage, danfornebraska.com. Now, the post office and rural delivery is very important to the people of Nebraska, and I would like to raise this issue with your listeners as a service to the people of Nebraska, if I may. The Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act of 2006, that makes the Postal Service prepay 7 years of pension obligations every single year. So over the course of 10 years, it requires the post office to pay the pensions on people who haven't even been born yet. Rural delivery is essential to Nebraskans, so I want to say there will be no privatization of the Postal Service. There will be no farming out of postal services. We will keep six-day delivery to our hardworking rural communities, and as Senator, I'll fight to make sure of that. Okay?
That's great. I mean, what I'm hearing is the plan from Hastert, of course, was to so weaken the Postal Service that it could be privatized and the union could be busted. But in the meantime, rural America would get the shaft, because without cheap and effective and very economical on a world scale The largest enterprise in the world is the Postal Service, largest company. And
sure.
without that, rural America would be an economic disaster area, because you wouldn't be able to have a business in a rural area taking advantage of the low rents and other economies. You got to have the Postal Service to do that.
Right.
Fantastic. All right, hang on 1 second. We'll be back for another segment here on World Crisis Radio.
Thanks very much.
With Dan Burdoff. I can hear it, the next senator from the great state of Nebraska. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., and we're so happy to be talking to Dan Burdoff, a contender for the United States Senate on the Tax Wall Street Party ticket in the state of Nebraska. His website is danfornebraska.com.
danfornebraska.com. Thank you very much.
danfornebraska.com. And what Dan just went through in the earlier segment is he's talking about parity prices for farmers to stop the looting and the sacking of the farm sector. The second point was modern infrastructure so that you can maximize all your efficiencies, right? To get farm products to market, they've got to go over land on a railroad, and that better be a high-speed rail or better. Right. The peace race internationally, and then saving the Postal Service and saving the Postal Union from Denny Hastert. And Denny Hastert, of course, is still here. He's a very powerful lobbyist, right? A lot of people don't know that, but he's still cashing in from his crimes as the Speaker of the House back under Bush. Dan, what strikes me is that you, with this is the American system as we used to know it. Great. And of course, Nebraska is a glorious chapter in that famous meeting, the Populist Party in Omaha in, 1890, that really set the stage for the New Deal and everything good that happened in the 20th century.
Sure. It planted the seeds for the whole Democratic Party, and I think the Democrats have lost their way a little bit, and maybe Tax Wall Street Party can bring them back in line. I certainly hope so. Webster, I was a teacher and a principal before I started doing this, before moving back to Nebraska, and everybody nowadays talks about the cost of higher education going up. It's gone up 500% since 1999. I can't even almost say it. 500% since 1999. And the Los Angeles Times article, they had an article this Monday, May 19th, and it pointed out that college prices have gone up in part because states can't subsidize student tuition like they used to. So we can also say that universities took a huge beating in the derivative losses, so that's a big problem. And my plan is to back the Elizabeth Warren bill, Bank on Students. You familiar with that? It's the force.
Give us a quick summary for those who are new to the program.
Well, sure. What it would do is force the Federal Reserve to refinance federal student loans at 0.75%. And I'm also going to tax Wall Street with a Wall Street sales tax and use that revenue to, one, stop the derivative trading. So they say that the power to tax is the power to destroy. So let's use power to destroy derivatives, the cause of the financial crisis we're in. Yes, go ahead.
It can be. It can be the power to destroy. And when it comes to derivatives, that can't come soon enough. Right.
So let's take it. Let's use that power to destroy derivative trading. And secondly, I want to use that Wall Street sales tax to rebuild these state budgets and take some pressure off these kids and parents. So if you go to danfornebraska.com, you'll see that I'm also fighting for a Medicare for all, and I support the H.R. 676. That's H.R. 676. It's the Expanded and Improved Medicare for All Act. Now, I personally know this type of health care works because I've seen it in other countries, and it's very popular and very effective. And I support the idea of paying for Medicare for all with a small fee of maybe $100 per person per month, so the current users of Medicare won't lose anything. If someone couldn't afford it, we can use the Wall Street sales tax to help them out. So we want to tax Wall Street, not Main Street, in that Wall Street needs to pay their fair share with a small sales tax.
And, of course, right now Wall Street pays nothing, right? Most of those banks pay no corporate income tax, and they pay no... there is a turnover tax which finances the Securities and Exchange Commission, but it's 0.0005 or something like that, right?
It's minuscule. They don't even feel it, and there's a reason for that. And I know a lot of your listeners might come from industrial parts of the U.S. where good jobs are hard to find, and I want to tell you listeners that I'm the only growth candidate in Nebraska, and I would be the growth senator in Washington. And I want to protect American industry and American farms and our Nebraska farms because free trade, Webster, free trade has failed.
Free trade has failed.
To begin making the switch to a system that works and can sustain generations of Americans for years to come.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of the race there, right? Ben Sasse would be the favorite, and from what I understand, the main thing with him is he wants to outdo himself with rhetorical flourishes, how much he hates the Affordable Care Act. He hates it. He detests it. He wants to destroy it. And that's obviously not good enough in a depression. You need to have some answers, not just a list of what you hate.
Right, and I think that a Medicare for all would give people the answers they need. So there you move away from the problems of Obamacare and the problems of the market-based insurance with the private healthcare companies rationing care, and you move into something that has proven it works. It's one of the most popular programs in the U.S., and it's proven it works. So I want to make something there for Americans that they can count on. I also want Americans to count on that we need to get away from these crippling free trade agreements and that are sucking our jobs and businesses and production away to low-wage countries. And we can do that by renegotiating and putting back a reasonable small trading tax with our trading partners. And
and I think we could also consider some kind of a tariff, right, a 10% or 15%.
That's what I'm talking about. Like this small tax, and we can do it. We don't have to. We're not talking about a trade war. We're talking about negotiating in a very orderly fashion and negotiating with our best trading partners and with our the countries of goodwill around the world, and bringing back this idea that everyone has the right, every country has the right to support their own industries and to build their economies. I mean, it's just reasonable.
They have the right. They have the responsibility also. So the website is danfornebraska.com, Dan for Nebraska. If you go there, there's a way you can contribute money. You can volunteer your time. This is a grassroots effort. It's not the millions of dollars coming from the Koch brothers or Soros or any of them.
That's correct. And I thank you very much for bringing that up, Webster. That's very kind of you. An army marches on its stomach, as we say. So danfornebraska.com is my website. You can also like me on Facebook, like this program on Facebook, Dan for Nebraska on Facebook, Dan for Nebraska on Twitter.
Follow Dan, right? Start following
right.
So you keep up with this. This is going to be the most interesting campaign. Look, concerning Sasse, when Sasse won his primary there, right, against those other two Republicans,
sure.
There was an article, sort of a puff piece in the New York Times. There are a couple of things about it. Let me just mention two things. One is one of your local blogs there in Nebraska said that Sasse, at the beginning of his campaign, maybe he was unguarded, he started saying, I was the interface of the FBI, the CIA, and the Department of Justice.
Right.
So he's a top intelligence spook. That's one thing you might comment on. The second thing is a woman wrote in saying, I knew him in high school. This guy Sasse, 20 or more years ago, Sasse was running around telling people he was going to be the 45th president of the United States running as a Republican. And this woman writing in says that this was corroborated by a friend of hers who told her that when Sasse got to Harvard, right, because he's got this big elitist resume, that at Harvard Sasse was touting himself as the 45th president. Well, now, Obama's 44, so there's still a chance to be 45.
Right. So Sasse has a case of insider denier. Yeah, but you can go to danfornebraska.com to learn more about my campaign.
Hang on 1 second. Let me just get your answer to that, and then we'll let you go in the beginning of the next segment here.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Just a couple of more minutes with Dan Burdorf out in Nebraska. Dan, probably the most interesting candidate for the United States Senate in the current cycle, challenging the liberal Republican golden boy, Ben Sasse, with his fantastic resume. Sasse claiming that he was the interface of CIA, FBI, and DOJ, a spook of the highest level, and somebody who has been touting himself as the 45th president of the United States for the past 20 to 25 years, as far as we can tell. What do you make of all that?
Well, I think what those articles you're referring to is on Nebraska Watchdog. Dina Winter wrote up some interesting biographies about him at the beginning of the race, like you said, last summer, and it really touts his connections with the big government jobs and very big corporations. Dr. Ben Sasse, he's a doctor. He's a president of a university, and I think he might be the only president of a university to actually call for people not to go to college. I think he's against higher education. I think he's come out on that. But Dr. Ben Sasse is the anointed one in the race, that's for sure. And I'm sure that you know it sounds like that he is the Club for Growth candidate, and he's the insider denier. I think you can call him the insider denier because he denies his tremendous government and elite corporate resume. And he worked for Bain Capital, that's the same company where Benjamin Netanyahu met his lifelong pal Mitt Romney. And Dr. Sasse also worked for the McKinsey and Company, where Chelsea Clinton worked. So
international consulting firm and
sure.
Influence peddling.
Right. You can see that these are really elite institutions. And what's strangest of all is that Dr. Sasse, he has this, he consistently plays down his prestigious government jobs as like you said, the liaison between the FBI and the CIA.
And the DOJ.
And because I think
three ways.
If I'm right with this Nebraska Watchdog article, it says that he was number 2 man at DOJ at the time. And he also doesn't like to mention.
Well, maybe you're right. Anyway.
He also doesn't like to mention he was the number 4 man in the Department of Health and Human Services, and that also came out in these Nebraska Watchdog articles. So,
right.
Yeah, it is strange, very strange.
There's a lot of material there, but Dan, why don't you come back next week and let's go through a little bit more about Sasse, because there's some darker aspects that I'm afraid we may have to deal with. But I think that's enough for this time around. danfornebraska.com, danfornebraska.com. Great place to spend a week in the summer campaigning.
Yeah.
You're gathering signatures right now. How long does that go on?
We have till August 1st. We have to turn in around 6,000 signatures. So we're working really hard. We're gathering team up to go out to all the big populated areas and events. So wish us luck. We'll need it.
Okay, we wish you luck. And
thank you very much.
If you want to spend a World Historical Week in Nebraska, now you know what to do. Right out there in Middle America, in the sunshine, in the cornfields, and on the stump.
And
we'll see you soon, Dan. More power to you. Thanks for everything.
Thank you very much, Webster. Bye-bye.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. Let's just say a few things about the European parliament. Actually, before that, notice in Libya, the person who wants to drive out the parliament and seize control of the government is Khalifa Haftar of the CIA. He lived in McLean, Virginia all those years. He was sent over in 2011. General Yunus, a Gaddafi veteran, had taken over the rebel military, and General Yunus was assassinated by that February Martyrs Brigade, who was then supposed to provide the security in Benghazi when Ambassador Stevens got killed. So Khalifa Haftar is right in the middle of the CIA plotting in Libya 2011-2012. And remember, Benghazi was an October surprise by General Petraeus and others designed to get Obama out and Romney in. And it might have been Vice President Petraeus before you knew it. Now, the European election, the bottom line, vote for Tsipras, vote for Alexis Tsipras. Here's what we know. According to the Washington Post today, the only candidate that the bankers fear is indeed Alexis Tsipras. All these other people, Farage, Le Pen, Wilders, Grillo, Alternative für Deutschland, these are all fakers. These are all wretched figures. They're not anti-system. They're not an alternative. They're not a critique of the system. They are essentially the reserve army. With Tsipras, you get somebody who the bankers are sincerely concerned about, and he's going to offer you an anti-austerity vote, anti-austerity protest vote, plus the idea of a debt conference, which could be used then to write down derivatives, because that's the main form of debt that Europe is afflicted with. So that's why Tsipras is the best. Now, some of this stuff gets quite grotesque. The Green Party, their right-wing, pro-austerity, pro-financier, and warmonger stance. In one of those debates, we had the question of sanctions against Russia come up. Ska Keller, the unfortunate candidate of the Greens, piped up in favor of sanctions against Russia, as Tsipras was concluding that this stuff was bad for Europe. In the case of Grillo has now gone into the wild blue yonder of pure insanity. Grillo has threatened essentially the mafia elimination of the Italian Prime Minister Renzi. We know Renzi. Renzi is a neoliberal banker's boy installed there by De Benedetti and Soros and so forth. But Grillo comes out and threatens him with the Lupara Bianca, the white shotgun, I guess it means, but it essentially means that you're going to disappear and never be found. I guess an equivalent would be you're going to get a cement overcoat and nothing will ever be heard from you. You're going to sleep with the fishes, in other words. Grillo says that Grillo is beyond Hitler, although he also says that he came on the Bruno Vespa show on Italian television this week to prove to older Italian voters who might be disillusioned with Berlusconi, who's doing his community service right now, that maybe they could vote for Grillo. I would urge them, don't do it. Grillo is promising chaos, delirium, and essentially the end of the world. And notice the Grillo formula. He attacks politicians. He says politicians are corrupt and they should go home. Yeah, what about bankers, Grillo? What about the people who actually control and dominate the system? This is the so-called qualunquismo, this pujadisme, very crude, stupid, racist, reactionary, low-level stuff that we get from Grillo. And anyway, the point is that the bankers are afraid of Tsipras, but they're not afraid of Grillo. Grillo was endorsed by Goldman Sachs. Farage is an ex-stockbroker of the City of London. The same goes for the rest of them. Right? They're all cut from the same cloth. The word now, France 24 is reporting that the early returns, I guess, from the Netherlands, because this voting has started already in the last day or two, the early returns from the Netherlands indicate that Wilders has come in fourth. Now, it's expected that the two leading parties will be the Junkers of Luxembourg. That's the Christian Democrats, Popular Party, and the rest of them, Merkel, Rajoy, and so forth. And then on the other side, the Social Democrats with Schultz. The big question is who comes in third? It's quite possible that Tsipras could come in third and not Verhofstadt of the European liberals. So go out and vote for Tsipras. Go Tsipras. And don't vote for those right-wing Greens. They're insufferable. No to Keller, no to Jose Bob. And we'll see you next week on World Crisis Radio.